check. I was
All
supposed
right.
to put a tweet out this morning, but it looks like it's scheduled for tomorrow about the seminar, so I just put it out.
Yeah, all good, all good. All right, here we go. So again, I mean, we don't need to cover this too much, but I don't know if we really talked about why it's important to just be having a raise first in strategy so much, rather than just saying like, oh, you should, just be
Yeah.
raising every time. So again, like for one, it's really good to just like taking down the pot pre-flop, like having the opportunity to do that, like is a big win. And whenever you limp, that option is obviously off the table. For two, if you just limp, you give other people in front of you a good chance to limp behind. So the chances of you playing a multi-way pot are going to go higher. And obviously, the more people that are in a pot, the harder it's going to be to win that pot. So if you can get yourself in a situation where there's only if you're only heads up or there's two other opponents as opposed to you limping and it's easier to like go 4 to 5 way in a pot, your chances of winning the hand are going to be a lot greater. So between that, also it's going to be kind of easier to put your opponents on a range. I mean, maybe not so much because we still don't know what they're doing, but we can at least narrow down our range a little bit because we're going to know what hands we're opening from what positions and kind of go from there pretty much. Again, it's going to be kind of hard to understand what our opponents are actually doing, so we can at least start with what our raising range is. And again, if you guys are kind of unfamiliar with charts, I highly recommend that you buy at least BBZ's charts. Again, we're not affiliated with them, but they're absolutely worth the money. And if you are at least playing a solid pre-flop strategy, then that's going to make your tourney game like a million times better, because like a lot of mistakes are made post flop because you're making pre-flop decisions that are gonna affect your future games. So if we can start making better decisions pre-flop, that's going to be like a big start to you guys really improving your win rate.
Yeah, sounds good, mate. I think we did this one last time, or maybe we left off on this one.
No,
It's been a while
I would
we left off.
absolutely remember the 10-8 of hearts. Oh, maybe we did. Oh, yeah, we did. We did. You're right.
Whether we open it or not. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, good brain, Kurt. And this guy bets, calls. Yeah, okay. King Queen, definitely would open here. Definitely strong enough to open. Again, I won't harp on that too much. We've already covered that, so no need to beat a dead horse. I don't understand the expression, but I'm going to use it anyway. This guy's timing out. Skip ahead a little bit. Yeah, we can call here. We're going to limp, sure. I think this hand is strong enough. For what it's worth, I think the guy's range of the big blind is going to be relatively tight. Like, he's not going to be ISOing super wide in the spot, I don't think. We definitely have to fold here. I like the guy's size as well. I don't think he should be betting this board all the time. So when he does, I think a good size, big size is probably good.
Let me say a really quick story from last night while we're having. I mean, you can keep going if you want, but while I have a little dead air.
Well, I mean, I think we can talk about this spot here real quick because this is insane spew. For one, the 6-5 suited, 6-5 offsuit needs to be folded versus a 4.5x open. I mean, he can complete for sure, but once there's a 4.5x ISO and a call from EP, like for one, he's in the worst position, and two, he's getting an awful price with a hand that doesn't play very well, so a bad call by him pre-flop. And then calling the flop, I guess, is fine. So he's making it a pretty big size here. So I really think when a size is being made this big, he's basically being put in a position where he either has to jam or fold because of the stacks behind. Now, if they're like 200k effective, I think he can probably do a little bit more calling. But with stacks this shallow, he's not really getting a good price to just call here. So if I'm going to proceed here, I'm either jamming or folding with a double gutter. That being said, I would be pretty tight here because I would expect this range here in the big blind to be relatively tight too. Like probably the biggest bluffs here being like a Jack 10 of hearts or a Queen 10 of hearts, something with two overs and backdoor straights and flush draws. But more often than not, I just think that the big blind's going to be really, really tight here. And then when we see him double barrel off with ace king high, all of that I just said completely goes out the window. This is way too spew. This is a massive overplay by ace king. I think the bet on the flop might be okay sometimes, but he's got to go through two different players. He has no backdoor flush draw, no anything. I guess the only thing good that's going for him is that his ace or king are usually clean outs here. So, but other than that, I would be checking here quite a bit. And once called, this 5 is pretty bad. Like, even if your opponent has a hand like 6-5 himself, 7-6, 3-4, I don't even know if he's probably getting the price to call with these hands as well. So on this 5 specifically, I don't even think he gets a lot of folds. So this is just a massive overplay by ace king here, and probably once the guy check calls with a 6-5, he probably has to call it off. But yeah, not very surprised to see this at all. Min 3-bet. All right. You go ahead, Steve, while we're looking for the next hand.
Oh, it's a hilarious story from last night. So I ordered like fucking like 7-Eleven or something at like 1 a.m. just to get a couple snacks. And all right, wait, I guess we'll stop here real quick.
Yeah. So again, I think this is pretty close. He should be jamming hands that are worse than this. He's definitely going to be jamming like some king 10 suited, some jack 10 suited. But for the most part, I think people are just like way too tight here. Again, I guess for this tournament that we've seen, people have been insanely loose and aggressive. So I don't hate this. I think it's close either way. I would definitely be more okay calling this in the small blind than like let's say the cutoff or the button, because there are less ranges that we have to go through. If I don't know if the min ISO really makes a whole lot of sense, because once you do this, you're basically pricing yourself to have to call off versus the big blind if he jams here. I think you basically be getting like 2-1 on a call here. So with the hand this week, I think it's still fine. Like, it's okay to call, but I would probably just call and then end up folding to a jam, because if we just call for 6.5 bigs and he ends up ripping like a little more than 28, we can definitely just fold here. And when we just mid raise here, we're kind of pricing ourselves in. So I would either be calling here or probably ISO jamming. Yeah, I don't expect this guy to like just hood like a 6.7 big jam here. I mean, maybe he would, $3 tournament, who the hell knows. But I would mainly be call or fold here. And other hands I would be calling with are basically like traps, like 10s through aces, maybe some ace king suited, stuff like that. And then we can kind of jam everything else in between. That's basically good enough to play for stacks against this FISO guy if he happens to wake up. So yeah.
Are you I'm not calling here for what it's worth. Like usually, I don't know if that's it's a little. I mean, like I'd probably be calling for like 4 to 5 bigs, starting like that. Let's say, like probably not 6.7, or I think that's about what he had.
I think it's close. It's probably winning a little bit if I had to guess. I'm not gonna bother running this. Like I said, he's definitely like ripping worse hands than this, and we only have one other player to worry about waking up. So I don't necessarily hate this call at all. Like I said, I think it is probably slightly winning. If he's jamming hands like 10-7 suited, then it's absolutely going to be winning up against a fair amount of his range here. So yeah, I think it's probably fine. Maybe we could end up folding like ace deuce off, ace 3 off. This is like right on the threshold, I think. But I don't hate it by any means. I think it's definitely close.
In bigger tournaments,
in
bigger tournaments, you have to worry though. I mean, like if I'm in the big blind there and I think the small blind is playing kind of face up with their hand, if they call there, I'm ripping 100% as long as I have a better hand than the original opener.
If you're in the small blind?
No, if I'm in the big blind.
Oh, okay.
And I think the small blind's calling because they don't want to get it all in, but they think they have a better hand than the original shover.
Yeah, and that's true, but like I said, I would definitely have some calls with basically the very bottom of my calling range, like the ace 4 here, and then I'd also have calls with the very top of my range. So basically, when you see that, your opponent should basically have either a hand they're calling to either fold to a jam by the big blind, or they're calling to potentially trap the guy in the big blind to be ripping something else that maybe he ends up folding. And then even if he ends up hood calling, like if you have aces or kings, like who cares? You still got a really good hand. You entice this guy to come into the pot where he might have folded if you jam. So yeah, I think that's half true for sure. And maybe people aren't covering their ranges like as well as that, I guess. But at least in you guys' shoes, if you're in that spot, you should be calling with the very top and the very bottom of your range, and then you can just basically jam everything else in between that's good enough to play for stacks.
Yeah, so
you're calling polarized, and you're ripping on I guess a condensed range.
Right. So basically, anything that's good enough to play for, like, if the guy ends up waking up with a hand in the big blind, like, you don't hate it anyway. Like, your hand's good enough. Like an ace jack off or a king queen suited, something like that. Like, because even if you rip those hands, he's still gonna call, like, for example, if you have ace jack or king queen, he's still gonna call, like, jacks, tens, nines, stuff like that. So even when they do wake up at the top of their range, sometimes you still have a hand that is potentially flipping. So same with, like, if you just, like, rip pocket eights there, he's still gonna call with, like, ace king, ace queen. So even when you run to the top of their range, sometimes you still end up flipping. Where if you just do that with a hand like ace four, when the big blind wakes up, you're basically smoked no matter what. You know what I mean?
Okay, let's reverse this hand.
Yeah. So this is way too loose. I think from these positions at 50 bigs, well, for one, we have to consider the EP openers range. This should be the tightest range at the table. So we need to have a relatively tight range in order to proceed. That being said, I think even a hand like ace 10 off probably gets folded here, and even ace jack probably has some fold, and I would assume ace jack is mostly going to be 3-betting at these stack sizes with maybe a little bit of call and maybe a little bit of fold too. If that gives you guys any kind of idea, I have the chart up here, so I'll just show you what we have in terms of chip EV here, so you guys can just get an idea about how tight we need to be in the spot. So yeah, this is an MP versus an EP open. You can see ace jack is barely v-pipping here at all, and when it is, it's 3-betting because this is like such a weak hand based on the EP opener's range that is basically playing ace jack as a bluff or a fold. So yeah, you can see just how tight we need to proceed versus an EP opening range. Now, if the guy's opening a little bit wider, obviously we can start including a few more of these hands because obviously the wider EP is, the wider we can v-pip. But just from a chip EV standpoint, this is what we are able to play here. If this gives you guys any kinds of idea about how we should be playing here or proceeding. And another thing that's important to remember is obviously, like, the tighter the positioner's opening range is, the tighter we have to be with our range. Now, if we're going up against a cutoff open, then obviously we can v-pip a lot wider because the cutoff is going to have a lot wider range than what we're going to be facing versus like an EP or an MP open. So, and then obviously not much to say. This hand is in the call versus EP, but versus a squeeze and an overcall. This hand just plays very poorly. Even a hand like ace suited, a7 suited, might be kind of close. You're getting a decent price, and a7 suited kind of plays well in a multi-way pot for deeper stacks. But yeah, again, ranges are just going to be like super tight. We're playing a $3 tournament again, and even in the games I'm playing, I'm always bitching every single stream I run that people just do not 3-bet like enough bluffs on top of their value. Like more often than not, in like low to mid stakes games, when you see people 3-betting, they are only really including the value hands and are really lacking the bluffing range, which is also fine in these games. If you have people calling super wide, then you kind of don't need to be bluffing, because if you have opponents that are calling with hands that they should be folding, then there's really no need to bluff, because you're just going to get value every single time when you have a strong hand here. So, but yeah, more often than not, when you're playing in lower stakes games, I would be very careful about how tight or how loose you want to proceed versus a 3-bet, because most people are just like super strong in these spots.
And is that range for the bluffs is the same as the other one you were talking about as well too, right? The polarized range. Like the bluff hands are those usually the ones that you're almost always going to fold to a 4-bet?
I guess explain that again real quick.
When you were saying the bluffs that you should have in your 3-bet, besides your value hands, should those be hands that you're almost exclusively folding to a 4-bet shove?
Well, your bluffs usually, yeah, of course.
Yeah,
so
yeah, sure.
and those are mostly going to include hands that block like the top of your opponent's opening range, pretty much. So it's usually going to be some sort of ace x suited, king x suited, basically like some ace 4s, ace 5s, because they block like the ace kings, ace queens that your opponent's going to be 4-bet jamming. So when you block your opponent's the top of your opponent's range, those hands are usually used pretty well as a 3-bet bluff. The same can go with a hand like king 10 suited, king 9 suited. Those hands can mix it in there because those also block ace king, king queen suited, pocket kings obviously. So usually when you have a 3-bet bluffing range, it's going to be with hands that kind of block the top of your opponent's range. So a lot of suited ace x, a lot of suited king x. But again, in these games, if I see people like calling really wide, I wouldn't even have a 3-bet bluffing range because people are just calling, like they're not folding hands they should be. So your bluffs aren't going to work as often. So the adjustment that you can make is just like 3-bet with value hands, pretty much. You don't even need a bluff in these spots. So yeah, for the size, we can definitely call. Again, we won't harp on the limp so much. I kind of like this raise. I think calling is fine too, but this raise is actually pretty gangster. For one, I think the price is like we can never fold. That's the main thing that I want to talk about here. So he's betting a little less than 2 bigs here. So we basically have to continue with like 80% of our range here. So a hand with backdoor straight, backdoor flush, and an overcard to the jack is definitely going to need to proceed here. Now, I don't think it's like a fist pump call. Like, I definitely think it has merit to raising and getting immediate folds. And then even if you get called, you can turn really well and continue double barreling and putting on pressure. But it's definitely good enough to call too, as long as we don't fold here. The smaller he bets, the more we need to call. And yeah, I like the raise here, actually. We can definitely call, but I really like the raise too. Yep, nice hand, agora. Get to the break here. Let's go to 48 minutes.
All right, so let me finish the story from last night real quick. So yeah, I ordered 7-Eleven, right? Like the guys at the, it's weird. This place is like 5 minutes from my house, you know, and I'm like waiting. And it looks like the guy's like stuck at the end of the neighborhood. And I'm like, huh, I wonder if he got pulled over. That'd be kind of weird, right? And he's just like stuck there. And I'm like, I kind of feel like this guy got pulled over. And then he messages me. He's like, oh, I got pulled over. But we'll pause it for a second here. But he wrote, the cop's going to let me deliver the food. And I'm like, this is like 45 minutes late or something. I'm like, I think he's like arrested, you know? And anyway, a few minutes later, the food gets dropped off. And I'm like, oh, sweet. So I grab it. And there's a cop outside dropping off the food. Like the cop dropped off the food. So this guy's probably going to jail or some shit. Or I don't even know. And the cop dropped off the food, gave me a wave. It was like 2 a.m., you know? I was like, oh, okay.
Wait, this actually happened to you?
What?
This actually happened to you?
This was last night, bro, as I was playing this
I
tournament.
saw this exact thing on YouTube.
Yeah,
I did too.
Like the
Aussie
cop
man.
delivered the DoorDash.
You got arrested.
Yeah,
I saw that same
delivered-
video, Kenny.
Yeah, this is real life. Dude.
I literally just
should've
saw that video
recorded it.
like 2 or 3 days ago.
I thought about it after, like, man, I should have recorded this.
Same thing happened to me, Kurt. Like, I was like, wait, did you see the video or is this real life?
I was gonna say, did it happen to
Man.
Steve? But I'm pretty sure the person getting the food was a woman, so it definitely wasn't Steve.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's funny that you say that.
Common thing, apparently.
Yeah.
Yeah, Steve left out of the story, though, that the cop was actually narco.
Yeah, that was actually narco cop.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this isn't a bounty, I'm assuming, right?
No, it's not.
Okay. So this is clearly like, I guess I'll let Agora, if you want to chime in here. Yeah, I'm just curious. 8.5 bigs, I think. Yeah, 8.5 bigs. So why are we
What's your
calling
thought
here?
process in calling here? Yeah, what's your thought process in calling here?
I call this?
Yeah. Snapped it.
I'm wondering if I post in the chat that it was a mistake. I honestly, like, looking at it now, I don't know why I would have called that.
Okay, maybe it could have just been a misclick or something like that. So I would assume that's what it had to be. So I just kind of wanted to hear what was going on. Or maybe you thought it was a bounty. I don't know if you had a bounty tournament going on at the same time. But
Yeah, I definitely didn't think it was a bounty. I'm just like, I mean, I could have easily just been fully tilted and just been like, fuck it, I'm calling him. Like, I'm not gonna try to act like I'm better than I am.
Okay.
I'm just confused as to why I would think that is a good idea.
yeah, like I said, I'm not even looking for an appropriate answer. I'm just kind of looking for what you were thinking. You know, more than anything. So it could have been a misclick. We've all been guilty of that too. So that's fine.
Well, this is a good thing to touch on while we're on it too, like how tilt can affect you as a player, and like, you know, like if that was a tilt move, let's call it, whether it's a misclick or a tilt move, like I think it is important to just, like something I tell Slammer all the time, something I tell so many of you guys is just like stay within yourself, like don't tilt, just make the best moves. Think of like Kurt is standing behind you and like watching your play, and like you want to make sure that Kurt is like likes what you're doing, right? Like you want to make sure you're making the best play every time, and like don't just don't ever tilt. Like, there's going to be shit that happens going to make you want to tilt, and it's going to be shitty, but just stay within yourself. Like, just make, like, all you can do is play your best. Like, poker's already difficult as it is. Like, play your best every time, you know? And, like, it's easy to say, but, like, it's so important. And, like, so many players tilt is a huge issue. And, like, that's why they don't succeed, because they just can't control, like, those feelings inside them of, like, oh, fuck these players, or, like, oh, whatever, I'm on this downswing, or whatever it is, or my wife's yelling at me, or my girlfriend's yelling at me, or, you know, I don't know, whatever it is, you know? I just think it's such an underrated aspect of the game, you know?
I would say tilting
that.
is fine as long as it doesn't like affect your play. It's good to vent. I think that's probably the best thing that I can say. Like, don't hold it in so that you just eventually blow up at some point. It's okay to like be mad about it, but just, you know, scream out a loud fuck, give yourself 10 seconds, and then get yourself back into the game, pretty much. So I definitely think it's okay to vent a little bit will be the first thing, but just don't let it affect your play on the table. I mean, I'm sure most of you guys have seen Seinfeld, and you know Serenity Now, and you saw how that didn't work out very well. So don't hold it in. Don't hold it in.
Don't hold it in, but I always say, like, take a few deep breaths, whatever you need to do, walk around for a second, whatever it is, like, just do something where it takes you away from that moment even for a little bit, and just gotta give yourself a mental reset, whatever it takes, like a little mental reset, like, all right, we're moving on from this. Of course, yeah, like, sometimes you're just gonna be fucking pissed and whatever, but, you know, some people are, like, on tilt, like, all the time. It's just how they play poker. They're just, you know, I'm sure you've seen these people. They're always on tilt. Like, no matter what happens, they're mad, they're pissed, whatever, you know, like.
Yeah, I don't know why these people decide to play poker if it makes them so angry all the time. Like,
Yeah, you know, I mean, Kurt, you know how many people, we have friends who are professional players who just hate the game, right? Like, I mean, I'm sure I know some people who do, for sure. Like, I can think of a few off the top of my head.
Yeah. So this is like pretty close, I think. I would say we probably can call. Again, it's pretty dependent on how aggressive your opponent's jamming here. Like, I just know off the top of my head that your opponent should definitely be jamming for 11.5 bigs. They should definitely have like King 8 suited, King 9 suited, Jack 10 suited, Queen Jack suited, stuff like that. So immediately we can just say off the top of our head that we are dominating parts of our opponent's range. And even if they have a hand like 10s, 9s, 8s, we're flipping against those. If they have Ace Queen, we're a little bit, we're about a 3-2 dog. So this hand's definitely close. I mean, this would be like a snap in the big blind because we're closing the action. So this hand would be printing. But we also have to worry about 2 other players here. So without even doing the math here, I definitely think we have a call here. I do think it's close, but and against like, you know, tighter players, we might be able to find a fold. But even against tighter players, we probably have a call here. I think one of the first things you guys want to tell yourself when you get in a spot like this, if you can't just do the math, ask yourself if you dominate parts of your opponent's jamming range. And like I said, for example, I think for 11.5 bigs, our opponent should definitely be jamming hands like King 10 suited, King 9 suited, even King 8 suited, definitely Queen Jack suited, Jack 10 suited, Jack 9 suited, all these hands. So we know there's at least 6 different combos of hands, or 6 different hands that we actually beat right off the top of our head. So that alone should at least give you some indication that your hand is at least close. You know, if not, it's printing. You know what I mean? So I think these are good questions to ask yourself. If you think a spot is close, do you at least dominate parts of your opponent's jamming range? So I'd be okay with the call here.
I think it was a slight call here.
Probably don't like the jam because, again, if our opponents do call here, we're only really in okay shape if our opponent wakes up with a hand like pocket 10s, really, and we're just like flipping against that. So even when we wind up in the best possible situation, we're only flipping in this spot, really. And for 11.5 bigs, I think we can easily call. And then if our like small blind or big blind ends up jamming, we can easily fold this hand. Like, we would only be investing like 18% of our stack, so we can easily call and fold to a jam. I don't think jamming really accomplishes a whole lot. Now, if we had like 25 or 30 bigs, I think it would be fine because it's a little harder to call off like a third of your stack and then fold. But for this many chips, I definitely think we could just call here versus a jam.
And Kurt, let's just the rest of the session, I know we've been kind of flying through, but let's just start asking people a little bit during these hands too.
Okay.
For the hand.
Yeah, I did say early on that I just wanted to get through a bunch of hands because I realized how much coverage we had, but I guess I kind of slipped on asking you guys questions as well, so my bad there.
You're in the zone.
Yeah, auto zone. Yeah, again, we need to be opening here. I think this is
I
good
was gonna
enough to
say, I don't
open.
think anyone knows that commercial, Kurt, other than me and you, because I've said that phrase to people, and everyone looks at me like I'm insane.
Oh, have you?
So,
I don't even know why. I just get it from watching football, basically.
get in the zone, auto zone.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I just wanted to mention on a King Jack hand, one of the main reasons I'm not jamming there is both small blind and big blind had us covered.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something I wanted to briefly mention there as well.
Yeah, that's kind of along with what I was saying, is if they do wake up, then they're basically going to have hands that end up dominating us, really. So if the blinds had like 25 bigs, I think the jam would be fine. But the fact that they do have us covered for so many chips, I think we probably just need to fold.
Let's go back on that one. Let's go back on the ace-6 real quick. Let's just talk about that. So let's say if we were opening here, would you be calling if the big blind shoved? Let's just say, like, I know we've talked about, come in, raise first in. Let's say he did come and raise first in here. Big blind shoved here with 12 big blinds. What are you doing? You there?
Am I? I thought you wanted other people to answer first.
Oh, no. I mean, okay, let's have other. Yeah.
Do you want us to type it or?
Yeah, type it in. Type it in training sessions. What are you guys doing? You're opening ace-6 off. If dirty we'd open ace-6 off, big blind shoves about 12.1 bigs.
Well, he limps here, doesn't he?
Well,
yeah. I'm trying to say if you open, what would you guys be doing? Yeah.
And I know we might get some biased opinions because we obviously see what he has in the big blind. But let's just say for 12 bigs, if we open the cutoff with ace-6 and big blind jams for 12 bigs, what are we doing?
I'm raise folding probably here.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually a pretty interesting spot, I would say. I feel like it's pretty close.
Like, if he has a few more chips in the big blind, it's probably a snap fold, but I'm probably folding regardless.
Yeah.
And Slammer's folding. Fountain Flood's folding. Yeah, I think you can open here. I think this hand probably opens like half the time. I think my charts are right. I don't know why 80 bigs. It might be opening a little bit less. But I know at least at 50 bigs, it's kind of like mixing folds and opens. And, for me in weaker fields, I'm just going to lean towards like opening a little bit more aggressively. DMC says he's mixing. Oh, you're mixing call and fold. Okay, so I guess that would basically determine on how aggressive your opponent is, or maybe how aggressive you've been. Because if people see that you've been like opening a lot, maybe they're going to be jamming a little bit wider against you. That's always the assumption I'm making, and then when I end up calling, they just end up having it because nobody fucking bluffs. So that's a move. Says calls mostly, but open a lot, and people shove light versus me. Yeah, you can just assume that people shove. Well, again, I'm not sure about these $3 games. I at least know in my like $20 to $50 games that people are just so tight. Even the regs in my 109s are just so fucking tight. I'm really sick of complaining about it all the time. Maybe eventually I'm just gonna stop calling. But Swift Road says I want to call depending on the player, mostly calling. All right, so what are you doing, Steve?
Yeah, it's really close, honestly. I'm like really on the fence on this one. I feel like it like kind of depends on the player a little bit. If I think the guy's like relatively capable, I'd probably call. But if I think he's like a huge nit, I'd probably fold. I think it's really close. I'd probably lean towards folding, but it could be really nitty.
Well, in general, I think this is one of our worst ace-X's that we're opening here. So right away, I'm not going to hate it. If we have to fold, I think it's like close at best. And usually if I think a spot is close, I'm just folding because I never give people credit for jamming wide enough in these spots. So I think we basically can take like what we think any spot, like if we think a spot is close, we should just be folding those because almost nobody jams like wide enough from these spots. Obviously, if you have other information that might let you know the guy's a little bit more wild than most people are, that's fine. But this is one of the worst ace-X's that we're going to be opening, so I don't mind the fold. Now, if he has like 9 bigs, we're basically priced in to call anything. Like, we're going to be behind a lot, but just for the price we're getting, we usually have to call. But again, in general, people just are not jamming this spot in the big blind like wide enough. So you guys can just take the assumption that if you think it's close, then just fold it, basically. Like, that's something that I've really been working on myself as well, just to remind myself that nobody jams wide enough from these spots. So if it gets close at all, I would just end up folding. Now, as it's played out, like with only 12 bigs, like, do you guys think this guy has any bluffs here? Like, what's the worst hand? Like, does he have raise folds in this spot? Like, maybe he should, but I don't think he does. I think this is just going to be, like, very strong hands. Even if he has a hand like ace king, ace queen, I think for 12 bigs, he's just going to end up jamming here more often than not because he just doesn't want to play that pot out of position and let Dirty Weed here get a free flop here. So I would say this is going to be, like, very polarized. I would assume this is mostly going to be, like, essentially jacks through aces because he's just going to end up jamming anything like pocket eights. I would assume it's just going to jam here. King queen suited is just going to jam here and stuff like that. So I actually think this is, like, really polarized. And again, maybe I'm being biased because I know the hand here, but just from my general experience, I would say that most people are just going to jam anything that they think is good enough here. And then if they're just raising here, then they probably have, like, really close to the top of their range because I don't think it's really, like, anybody has any bluffs in this spot.
Yeah, strong agreement there.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that overall, like, it's probably just a little bit of an unnecessary call. Like you said, like, is he bluffing ever? Like, maybe at best he'll have, like, I don't know, like a jack 10 suited or something, but he still could be, like, calling with hands like that too. It doesn't have to be just jamming or anything like that. So even against those type of hands, you're only a small favorite.
Right. So, like, this would be a hand I wouldn't hate overcalling here. Like, again, ooh, wow. So this is kind of crazy. Of all how wide we've been playing here, I'm like, okay, I don't mind a limp here. Mainly because I don't really like ISOing with a hand like this because when you get called, like, the hand doesn't play very well post flop. Also, I would be more incentivized to raise if stacks were, like, deeper here. Again, these small pocket pairs really play better when you're deeper stacked because, the deeper you are, when you make a set, you can win a bigger pot, obviously. So these smaller pocket pairs are usually pretty easy to open. To play. You either flop a set or you don't. So yeah, in this case, actually, I would be okay with limping behind. We want to see a cheap flop here. And if we do ISO and get called, we have a hand that plays very poorly post flop. So in this case, I would be okay with the limp.
Yeah, this is probably the best limp spot we've had so far. We've seen session,
Yeah, can I add something real quick?
Sure.
Yes.
So just to note, I'm pretty sure this is more so evident that I need to study the charts because the past three hands, like the king jack suited, where I shoved, and you were saying, like, realistically it gives him an opportunity since he has me covered and he can basically wake up with a better hand. I was shoving because in my eyes I'm like, I thought I was stronger than I was, and then also the hand prior, the ace six off. It's kind of the same situation, and then this, I thought the threes were weaker, so it's like I clearly just need to do more studying of the charts.
Yeah, I mean, that's true too, but it's also kind of like a lot of these decisions that we're making are based on how the population plays as well. So between, like, just getting more experience and then maybe studying a bit more with the charts is fine. Now, I don't think there's going to be a chart out there that tells you, like, what to overlimp, like, the low jack from versus an EP limp, basically. So we just want to be like, okay, what hands are good enough to limp here and what hands are good enough to ISO raise. So, like, the pocket threes specifically, that's a hand that plays well enough multi-way. It doesn't really want to, make a big pot because it can't call really versus a 3-bet when stacks are so shallow, and it doesn't play well post flop. So in general, that's kind of a good hand to just see a cheap flop with. Now, if you have something that plays a little bit better, like an ace jack off or a king 10 suited, I think those hands play better post flop. They're a little bit stronger. So ISOing with hands like that, I think would make a little bit more sense. And then if you want to, like, limp behind, let's say, like, maybe a jack 10 suited, which I also think you could probably ISO there, or maybe a 9-8 suited, something like that. Hand like that plays pretty well multi-way if you happen to see a multi-way flop there. So basically, when you come into those decisions, whether or not you want to ISO or call, you want to ask yourself, does a hand play well post flop? And does it play well multi-way, basically? Because when you limp, you're obviously encouraging other people to come behind you and limp as well. So the chances of you playing a multi-way pot are going to be higher. And for what it's worth, if you guys can take anything from this, we want to do our best to make sure that we're only playing a heads-up pot. When we're playing heads-up, it's going to be much easier for us to win our hand. It's also a lot tougher to bluff versus multiple opponents than just one opponent because you're going up against 2 to 3 ranges rather than just one. And then also, it's kind of difficult to pinpoint somebody on a range when you're going up against 3 ranges instead of just 1. So it's going to be more difficult overall to make decisions in multi-way pots than it is going to be heads up. So that's really the biggest reason I want to encourage you guys to, if you are having a limping strategy, you definitely need to start just like a pure raise first hand strategy. This hand's obviously, like, for one, this play doesn't exist. We are not going to have any hood calling versus 3-bets here. Our hand is either going to be good enough to 4-bet jam, or we need to fold it. Another reason here is because, you know, for one, we're out of position, so we have the worst position in the hand. For two, how do you say it, Sparch here, we don't know what he's going to do. Like, yeah, he might call, and we get to see a flop, but he might jam, and then we've invested 6 big blinds when we potentially might have to call off another 15, which we just might have to with the price here. Also, like, Kanan is repping a pretty strong range here. He's having, like, he's going to have, like, a lot of ace-king, king-queen suited, ace-queen suited, and then, like, even some of his bluffing range is going to be hands like king-9 suited, ace-8 suited, so we're even dominated by his bluffing range sometimes. So if we're dominated by his bluffs, then this hand is definitely too weak to be calling with. So essentially, this is what we call this when you just call versus an open and a 3-bet. We call it a hood call. This play should not exist at all. The only time this play would really be okay is if you're, like, super deep stacked, really, like 150 to 200 big blinds deep, and you have a hand like ace-queen suited, or which is even good enough to 4-bet, but, or like a hand like pocket sevens that wants to, like, see a flop in a bloated pot and can win a massive pot here. But other than that, this play does not really exist. So we get a fold here.
I flatted here with aces.
Yeah, but even with aces, like I said, I don't think you really should have a flatting range here at all. I think you're either 4-betting or folding. And even if you do call with aces, then there's a chance that Sparch comes in behind, which isn't the worst, obviously, if you have aces. But you're still going up against 2 ranges instead of just 1. So the chances that your aces don't hold on a board are going to be even higher. You know what I mean? Aces aren't just going to win every single time in this spot. So, and then again, for the biggest reason you don't call here at all, really, is because you have the worst position in the table. So you're playing out of position against a strong 3-betting range, and you also have no information on whether or not the low jack is going to fold or call or raise. So this basically should be a play that doesn't exist. I don't think we have any slow plays. We just 4-bet or fold. Like the check here. I don't think we get any leads. Now, on this turn, probably need to start bluffing. Yeah, I think the size is fine. Could probably even size up a little bit if we wanted to, but the size is fine. And now I think we have enough showdown value. I know, well, I have it at 1.5x speed, so it's going by a little bit faster. But I would definitely take my time here. I think when we just snap check, we're not really thinking about, are we going to bluff this spot, or is our hand good enough to jam? It kind of seems like our decision is like really easy. Either we're going to check, give up, or we just have a hand that's good enough to show down. So I would definitely just take my time a little bit here. I think the check is good. Like, you know, as you played the hand up to this point, I think, you know, you've done everything right so far. I don't think this hand is good enough to bet for value, and probably too strong to bluff. Now, the spot becomes pretty close on the river. Yeah, again, I guess I'm not really going to ask you guys what we do here, because this is just a kind of a rough spot to figure out. Yeah, and I think that what really sucks is that, I guess, hands that he should be bluffing here, maybe he ends up bluffing like ace-king, ace-queen sometimes, or king-queen, and we do block that range with our king here. So we're blocking his bluffing range. Yeah, so I guess maybe his highest bluffs here are going to be like an ace-5, if I had to guess. And that's, you know, if he has ace-5 in his bluffing range, which, again, in these $3 tournaments, I'm just not giving people credit for 3-betting hands like that. Yeah, I kind of hate this. In theory, this would probably be a fine call, but this also looks like he's kind of begging for a call. Like, I would be more likely to call if he just ripped here, because I think he probably has more bluffs in his range if he just jams in this spot. So even though I think in theory we can probably call here, this just looks like he's looking to get some thin value here with a hand like ace-10, or maybe check back a hand like queen-jack, which I also don't think would be happening very much, but this just looks like he's trying to get some thin value, or maybe he's trying to get a crying call, and he has like pocket jacks, and he knows he blocks like the top of top pair anyway, which is going to be the most likely calling hand in the spot. So yeah, I think I would mainly just end up folding here because this kind of looks like a hand he's just trying to get called with here.
And also, I know we talked about this, Agora, but just take your time with your actions. I think this will be something that'll help you so much, just to not be so quickly with all your actions and just really think through it, especially now that you're, learning a lot and, getting all these lessons. I think it's just going to help a lot. Like, we've talked about it a lot, but I just want to reemphasize that again.
Yeah, I was even posting that in the Twitch chat last night, that it was like I would hit check or whatever, and then I would just think of Kurt saying, like, just to slow down your action, and then I would unclick it and just, like, sit back and be like, all right, let me actually think about this.
Right.
So I'm starting to get into the habit of that.
Yeah, sometimes half the battle is breaking some of these habits from before. Like, you learn a habit, you start doing it a lot, and then it's just like breaking that habit and getting into the good habits, and then you're just, sometimes there's bad habits develop over time, and you don't even know how they happened, and you got it from somewhere, and now you're doing it, and yeah, so it's just, all the little things add up for sure like that, and I think it'll help a lot just sitting there and even thinking about a hand for 5 seconds longer than you've been doing it is going to go a long way, 5-10 seconds longer,
Poker.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What you guys think? Do you ever read into timing tells if somebody is check calling and they're calling instantly?
100%.
Like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was gonna say, how do you read those? And do you ever then try to reverse that around and try to take advantage of it when you're in the opposite position yourself?
Great question, actually. Do you want to touch on it, Steve, or I can go? Whatever you want to do.
I'll touch on my opinion on it.
Okay. Go for it.
You can go ahead. So I used to actually think about this a lot more than I do now. I still think about it somewhat now, but I used to, like, if I saw someone snap call the flop or snap call the turn, especially the flop, I would be like barreling like a lot of the time because I perceive that as like weaker. Like, usually people have to like think about it a little more if they're super strong rather than just like instantly call on like whatever random flop. So I've actually used to take that and kind of like go for bluffs very strongly in those situations when I would do that. I don't do that as much now, but I do think like a quick call a lot of times is weaker. I don't know if Kurt is still on that same tip because this used to be like from years ago. I was thinking this from like many years ago. But there are like certain situations where you could tell, like if someone has no thought in a spot, like either that means they have something decent or they have something like kind of medium strength. But if they're not thinking about a moment, yeah, you can kind of take timing tells in certain ways. Or like, let's say, I don't know, on the turn, someone's really thinking into a spot that you think they have a close hand of calling right now, and they're really thinking into it, they're time banking or they're taking some time, and then they finally call you. Yeah, like sometimes they could be trapping you, so you have to be a little bit careful, but maybe that is that weaker hand that you're seeing, that person's now, because they're sitting on the turn thinking about it for so long, and you can kind of tell they have a tough decision right now, so there are little moments like that where you can pick up on like a little timing tell like that. But it's funny, because back in the day, I used to like really go off that timing tell of like, someone's snap call me flop and turn, I'm like barreling the river, I don't think they're super strong. I don't like focus on that as much anymore, but there are definitely still moments you can, gain valuable information from timing tells. Go ahead, Kurt.
Yeah, so you made a lot of good points there that I'll probably just add on top of. So like Steve said, I think when people make these snap decisions, for one, I think they're trying to appear like they're stronger than they actually are, and they're really kind of trying to discourage you from double or triple barreling because they're like, oh, I'm calling really quick here, like I want to show them that I have a hand I'm not getting rid of. When in all actuality, that kind of tells me that's what they're trying to show, and that kind of makes me think, like, yeah, they have a hand that's good enough to call 1 or 2 streets maybe, but they're going to be kind of grossed out if you triple barrel, like, for a big size, because it's, like, a big pot that they don't really want to take. So in terms of, I think that there's some reverse psychology going on here, that people, like, will make these quick calls to, for one, try to show that they're really strong, and for two, try to discourage you from barreling multiple streets. So, and then on top of that, a lot of times when I see people making snap calls, basically what that's telling me is, again, they have basically a hand that's strong enough to call, it can never fold, but they don't have a hand that's strong enough to either check raise or that they don't have a hand that they're thinking about like bluffing with. Because if they had a hand that was close they would take a little bit of time to think about it. Or if they had a hand that they're like, oh, I might check raise here sometimes, they would take some time to think about it. Like, it's very rare where you see somebody who's going to, like, either triple barrel off or check raise and barrel off, and they just make these snap decisions that they ever have a bluff. Because when you have these bluffs, you need to think about, like, oh, what's my bluffing range here? Like, what's his calling range? You're asking yourself all these questions. And if you see people making snap decisions in those situations, I just know that they have a really easy decision. Like, they have a top pair that's not good enough to check raise, and that's going to be put in a tough spot if they face multiple barrels. So, yeah, I think timing tells are really huge, and that's like, I'll be encouraged, like, maybe in a spot where I'm like, oh, you know, I'm gonna bet flop, and then I'm gonna mix here if I want to bet on the turn, and then I see the guy snap calling the flop, and I'm like, oh yeah, I'm fucking triple barreling here every time. So, yeah, I think if people ever reverse psychology that and start doing that with, like, the top of their range, then I'm going to be screwed because I bluff into that range a lot. But more often than not, I see people who are just, like, have really easy decisions, like mediocre kind of value, and they don't want to face multiple barrels. So that's another reason why you want to take your time, is because you don't want people who are able to pick up on those kind of tells take advantage of your range in that spot, basically.
Yeah. I was gonna say, I hope I don't have to play any of you at the tables, because I am definitely giving that away. But I did notice a while ago that I did that, you know, when I had like a second pair type hand, just exactly what you were saying, Terry.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm prepared to triple barrel, expecting them to fold the river most of the time. And hopefully I'm not leaning on that information too much and ignoring other things. But I definitely have started doing the reverse now to kind of mess with people when I'm nutted. I'll just instantly click.
I would highly encourage you to not go overboard with that, because you're sort of assuming the players you're playing against are one, good enough to notice what you want them to notice,
right?
And two, just aren't going to have it in that spot, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I would encourage you to lean towards standardizing the amount of time you take on your decisions. If not that, at least have a minimum amount of time you take on a decision, like wait 5 seconds before you fold or something, because, like, Kurt's right. Like, let's say I have pocket aces here. I'm going to take a few seconds to at least contemplate how to get the maximum value, right? And if I have a bluff, I'm going to contemplate how to get through. Like, it's most likely middling hands. And again, just because someone's snap calling doesn't mean they're not going to call the river. It just means they're playing their hand very face up. Like, you might get ego called if your story doesn't make enough sense or something along those lines.
Right.
Two examples I can just think of on the top of my head that aren't really related to, like, this, but, like, something we've already been talking about is, like, snapping, like, the timing tell when you have a big hand and you're snapping like a shove, right? Like, that's something you don't want to be doing because it looks so strongly like you have a big hand. So there are, like, different moments when the timing tell can affect you in different ways. Like, let's say someone checks to you on a flop and you instantly check back the flop, you know, to go to the turn. Like, that looks kind of weak to me. Like, you're probably not going to have super strong hand. You're not even thinking about your decision. Maybe you have a medium strength hand at best, you know? Like, some moment like that. So there are these kind of moments where people, like, put their hands a little more face up by their timing. And yes, you got to take advantage of that. Like, people think, like, it's funny, like, people think, like, live tells are, like, such a thing. And yeah, there's, like, little things you can gain off live tells, but more you're gaining off people's betting patterns. Sometimes people's timing. Like, sometimes people don't even know they're doing certain timing, and they're doing it all the time, and you can get something off of that. If you see someone snap checking back all the time when they have medium, weaker strength hands, okay, that's, like, a little note for you, you know? And yeah, I just think people, like, you know, these are the kind of things people, like, should be focusing on. Maybe not timing as much and more, but like people focus on, what I'm trying to say is a lot more on, like, live reads and stuff like that, when, like, betting patterns, timing tells, some things like that are a lot more what people should be focusing on in terms of, like, getting reads on people, I guess. You know, everyone thinks, like, you're going to see some eye twitch on somebody when you're playing live, and you're like, oh my God, you know, like, Teddy KGB, he took the Oreo out this hand, dude, he's bluffing. But, like, realistically, it's hard to get live tells on people. Like,
especially the better players you're playing against, Steve, the less they're going to give away. They're going to be more practiced.
Yeah, for sure. You know, the better the players, the less they're going to give away in terms of tells. They're probably not going to have any tells at all.
Like, an eye twitch, like, that's a movie thing. But, like, you'll see stuff in live poker, like, people will be bored and slouching in their chair, and all of a sudden they'll get dealt a hand and they'll sit straight up, right, and be paying attention. Like, that's the kind of baseline changes that you really should be paying attention to in live poker. But
wait, I'm gonna say one. Let me just say one quick live tell that I remember from, dude, I read Mike Caro's Book of Tells, right? In like 2007. You guys remember Mike
By the way,
Caro?
that's where this all started. Sorry to interrupt. You see, if that's where this all started from, is because I thought this was the online version of Mike Caro's thing.
Yeah. So I remember Mike Caro had this one thing in the book that this might be the one live tell I remember from the book that I feel like still works. So if someone's in the middle of the hand with you and they're betting pretty aggressively, and then they just start looking away from the table, just looking around the room, like just looking everywhere. Like, I feel like that is so strong. Like no one does that if they're not strong. Like, I don't know. Like, I feel like they're just trying to make it seem like they don't have anything. They're just like looking around. Like, that's the one thing I remember. I'm not even saying this is like a full live tell, but that's the one thing for me that I feel like when I see live and I see someone doing that in the middle of a hand, I'm like, all right, if I'm close, I'm probably gonna fold. You probably have it. You like don't even fucking care what's going on right now, you know?
Can I say something real quick?
For sure.
Steve? So before I was in a couple years ago, like 2 or 3 years back, I was in CLC, which is chip leader coaching. It was with Chance and Peter Angelo, like really high level players. And Chance is like huge on live tells. And the one thing he always mentioned is, if you notice Chance when he plays, he stares at his opponent for like a really long time before he makes a decision. And the one thing he says is, mostly this is like with non-pros, even sometimes with pros, is that when you stare at somebody and they're like frozen, like they're looking at one spot, and basically they're not giving you anything. But he says the more that time goes by and the more the uncomfortable the person feels, the more they start moving, the more they start fidgeting, which gives him tells that the guy is weaker. That's basically what he always used to tell us.
Interesting. I mean, it might be a thing. Chance does really stare people down, like really hard.
Oh yeah, and he says when someone goes from being frozen to movements, when he starts moving around or looking around, he says the more it tells him that the guy is weaker.
Huh. Interesting. Something to note, I guess, for sure. That's definitely interesting to think about. Yeah, maybe I should start staring into people's souls more live. That might be the move, just stare. People do get so uncomfortable when you keep just staring at them live. Like, no one will keep up like a stare down with you if you do it long.
I just get annoyed that you're taking 3.5 minutes on a turn check call. It's like.
Well, here's the thing too, though, Steve. Like, if you're very strong, it doesn't matter how much you stare at me. I'm gonna feel too comfortable to be like, you know what I'm saying?
True.
It kind of makes sense. Like, if I'm strong and you're staring at me, it's like, it's not going to bother me at all. So
that's a good point. That's actually a very fair point. I'll try that for my next few live events. Chance is such a fucking crusher live. Even he's like one of the best. So,
which are you talking about? Chance Corneth or which Chance?
Yeah. Chance Corneth. I was in his group at CLC.
Yeah, he's a crusher.
A couple of years back, and like he's really good with live tells, man. Like really, really good. So
yeah, he's got a ridiculous stare down too. I would absolutely melt under his stare down.
I just gotta laugh at people that stare. I'm like, are we adults? Are we doing this right now?
I know. I literally laugh sometimes in the middle of a hand. Someone will be doing. I literally, if it's like a rag, I literally like laugh. Like, I can't help it. Like, it's just so funny to me when they're just looking at me. I just like smile and laugh sometimes because I literally can't help it because it's so ridiculous.
But Steve, against amateurs, it works though, man. Like,
yeah, you're right.
Yeah, you feel comfortable and you think it's ridiculous, but someone that doesn't play a lot or is not in big spots, in tournaments, it wears on them and they give tells out.
Yeah.
Next time someone's staring at you for 2.5 minutes, just wink at them.
I've stuck
well,
my
that's the
tongue
thing
out.
though too, is like when you have a lot of high nerves, it has to come out somehow. It's going to bleed out somehow. So those little movements, those things you don't even necessarily think you're doing, like those nerves have to get out of your system somehow.
So I just want to say something real quick. Something I used to do when I was in the middle of a bluff, I would start talking to forgot which way I would do this. I think I would start talking to the opponent in the middle of the hand, to seem like, or maybe I wouldn't talk. And I think I started talking, and then I felt like when I talked in the middle of a bluff, everyone thought I was just so comfortable. Like, if you start talking in the middle of a bluff, on like the river, you shove and then you start talking to the opponent. They're just like, can't believe that you start talking to them, and they're like, oh, he has to have it now, you know? Like, I remember I used to think that, like, sometimes, like,
I told a story through a triple barrel in a live game one time, and it worked perfectly.
All right, we seem
so comfortable. Yeah, let's
circle back to the play here. On the last hand, can we go back to the sixes for a sec?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I don't even play live, guys. Please stop.
Well, first off, this is a fist pump open for me on the button here instead of a limp.
I mean, we don't have to keep beating that nail into
and I'm probably betting smaller as well here on the flop.
Okay.
Maybe a little less than half pot or something around there to open. I don't know. What do you guys think?
You can kind of do whatever here. I think the fact that this is a limp pot means that the pot on the flop is going to be a little bit smaller than if we had raised. So I don't mind sizing up here a little bit. Also, the board is relatively wet, so it's also kind of hard to know. Like, our big blind is going to be a lot wider because, you know, he didn't have to call versus an open. But the board is relatively wet. We don't block a jack here, so I don't hate the size. I think we can go small. I think we can go medium. I think we can go big. You can kind of do whatever with a hand like this. But this board is definitely going to have like small and big sizes because there's hands that are going to need to, like, are really strong on the flop right now. Like, let's say, for example, a hand like King Jack of Clubs is really strong right now, but any five, any diamond, any queen, ace, all change the value of a hand like that quite a bit. And then you're also going to have like hands that don't need a lot of protection, like this one very much. That could like be betting smaller here to potentially induce some like check calls or check raises here. So I think the bet size is probably fine in this spot. Fortunately, no action with the set. And easy limp call here. If we're going to be limping, it's 10-8 suited. We're not folding. This should be a much better board for the isolator's range than it is for us. This is way too loose. We literally have, like, if we want to even argue this, if we want to do this with like diamonds, clubs, or hearts, maybe we could do that. But this is just way too wide. We're also not representing a whole lot here. Like, we never have a hand like ace queen, aces, queens. I mean, if Agora's limping these hands, I'm not sure what his limping range is. But I would assume that most people who are limping are not limping ace queen, aces, queens, stuff like that. So this board in general is just really bad for us because we're not going to have a lot of the strong hands here. That doesn't mean that we can't have some raises, but we're going to have very few. And also when we do, since this board is so bad for us and we're not going to have many raises, when we do raise, we want to be raising for a much bigger size here because our range would be pretty polarized in the spot. Whenever we have a more polarized range, we want to use bigger sizes here. So I think the raise size is a little too small, and also this hand is a little too ambitious. We're not really repping a whole lot here. And then on the turn, like, this is even one of the best cards for us because we pick up a straight draw, but like this isn't even a very good draw for us. You know what I mean? Like, there's really very few turn cards that are going to improve our hand here. So I don't mind just giving up in the spot. But I mean, if one of the best cards for us actually like ends up not being good enough for us to like continue bluffing on the turn every single time, then that probably just tells us right there that this is probably a little bit too wide. Also, again, our story doesn't really make a whole lot of sense because we don't really have very strong hands on this board. Yep, good fold. Isn't limping too much a leak, especially if folded to pre-flop? Yeah, I think we've talked about that a little bit, but mainly, again, why we want to be opening a little bit more is because if we can, for one, if we can just take the pot down pre-flop and everybody folds, that's a decent win for us. And two, if we open pre-flop, then that increases the chances that we just end up playing a pot like heads up or three-handed, rather than if we limp, we give other people a good price to come in, and then if we're playing against 3 to 4 opponents regularly, it's going to be harder for us to win pots in those situations. So we want to be trying our best to kind of weed out the field and only have like the strongest ranges come along, I guess. Or we don't want to give other players a good price to come in the pot, because whenever we're playing against multiple ranges, it's going to be hard to win a pot. No, all good, Swift Road. I'm happy to cover it again. like we were saying even in the last session, I'm not even sure if I spoke on it, like why it's better for us to be raising than it is for us to be limping. So yeah, I'm just glad we got to cover that a little bit. Again, this hand would be pretty close. I think we probably end up folding here in general from these positions with King 10. I think King Jack off is the minimum that we want to be V-pipping here. Versus a jam, we have a very easy fold, I would say. Uh-oh. Yeah, well, holy hell, he found he found a worse hand jamming. I did not see that coming. So, again, I don't need to harp on this a whole lot more. I do think that most people are going to struggle. Like, I mean, you see, I think his jam with King 9 is good. I'm not even going to say that, especially if he sees how much limping Dirty Weed has done. I would definitely counter that by ripping pretty aggressively when I'm in a later position, because I think that his range is just like too wide. But yeah, I think in general, like this is just going to be way too wide. People are just going to have better hands than this more often than not. And again, I think the hand is even too wide to be V-pipping in early positions. So if somebody jams on me and I'm playing this hand, and I know I have close to the bottom of my opening range here, then I think it's definitely good enough for us to just fold. But again, he found the hand, and I was wrong. So everything completely contradicts what I just said. Again, I don't think we need to harp on this a little bit more, but I think this hand, if it folded to us, or even if it limped to us, yeah, I mean, I guess it would be okay to check, but we just want to get out of the habit of, okay, did I just say, okay.
Whoa.
Yeah, Agora, I'm going to let you hop in here. What's up?
Agora, you got to take more of these random factors out of your game.
Hold on, wait. Let's just let him explain his thought process here first.
Go ahead, sorry.
I was tilted.
Okay.
Maybe I'll hit the boat on the river.
Okay, well that's
literally it.
Okay, well, let's say you're not tilted here. What are you normally doing?
I mean, can you roll it back, like, or actually, there's probably no need to. It got folded to us. Where are we?
You're opening, or opponent's opening from middle position, and you're calling in the big blind.
I mean, realistically, I would probably either. Okay.
So, do you have leads in this spot? I guess I'll ask.
Yeah, I mean, I do. Probably shouldn't, but yes.
Okay.
But obviously, an ace or a king already puts them in a much better position than myself. So.
Okay, so you want to limp here. I mean, you want to lead here because there are bad turn cards for your hand, right?
I mean, yeah.
Okay. I mean, I'll touch on that here real quick. I don't know if you had something you wanted to say, Steve, real quick, but I'll harp on that after.
Mine's more of just like a thought thing. Go ahead. I want you to explain the hand first, and I'll say my piece.
Okay, so as I said, I think it's going to be good for us to simplify our strategies as much as possible. Like, I think leads definitely exist, and it's good to study them. But if you guys have not worked with solvers very much and you haven't really studied lead spots a whole lot, I think you can just really simplify your game and just have a pure check strategy when you're out of position here. Now, that being said, this is actually one of the worst boards for us to lead. Like, one of the absolute worst boards. Do you guys have any idea why this would be one of the worst boards for us to have a leading range here? I'll let you guys actually, in the training sessions, let's hear what you guys have to say. Why do you think this is a bad board for our range? Fountain Flood says range advantage. Ace King. It's a big one. That's a move says no Ace King, Queens, probably little jacks or tens. Yeah, disguise is good as well. Second best hand for value. We probably get some call with like pocket tens here. We have 9-8, we have king 9, so we have some straights, we have some strong hands here. But it's close to the top of our range. I agree, Fountain Flood. Razor's supposed to have a lot of straights, 2 pairs and sets here. Yeah, and the Rhodesian just really simplified it. Here he has the range and nut advantage. Yeah, so those are the biggest reasons here. We really lack nuts on this board here. We never have ace king, so there's never a chance that we have the absolute stones here when our opponent absolutely does. Now, like I said, we can have some king 9, we can have some 9-8, some jack 10, queen jack, maybe even some pocket jacks. But for the most part, our opponent's going to have all those hands too. So yes, we have some nuts, but our opponent has all the nuts basically in this spot. So if there's a spot where we are lacking in nuts, and one of the big reasons we want to develop a donk leading range is because a board is so much better for our range than it is for our opponent's range. Now in this spot, of course, like I said, we are going to have some nuts, but the some nuts that we have, our opponent's going to have those and other hands that are just not in our range here. So when that situation kind of comes up, we're not going to develop a leading range on these boards basically. So this is kind of where I was harping back to when I talk about how most people play donk leading ranges. Now Agora was saying like he wants to lead here because there's like a lot of bad turn cards. Any king, any ace, any 9, any 8, any 10 drastically changes the strength of his hand right here. So this is kind of what I mean where people start developing donk leading ranges based on their hand rather than understanding what their range is. And that's not to harp on Agora here, like plenty of people are capable and guilty of this as well, but this is just how, you know, we fix this mistake here basically. And also what's great about checking in a spot like this is we normally don't have many strong hands in this spot. So the fact that we do have a strong hand, for one, we can play with a little bit of deception. I don't know, I think Slammer mentioned wanting to disguise the strength of our hand, which is a very good point. And also, since this board is so great for our opponent's range, we expect them to really attack this board pretty aggressively. And when we have a super strong hand, do we want to see our opponents attacking this board aggressively? I would say yes, for the most part. So again, when it comes to leading, I think we can probably simplify our games for now until we start covering that a little bit more in depth in the future and just have a pure check strategy from here. But if you guys do want to develop a leading strategy, the first thing you need to ask yourself is, do I have more nuts on this board than my opponent does? And if the answer is no, then you can right away know that the answer is going to be, I never donk lead here. So I don't know if you wanted to touch on that at all, Steve.
Yeah, I mean, my point was kind of a little bit different. I actually just want to ask Agora, why were you tilted right now? I'm going to go to the therapist mode right now. Why were you tilted in this exact moment? I'm just curious.
To be completely honest, I was playing like 4 or 5 tables at the time, and also I'm on a 10-year downswing, so I'm constantly tilted.
Okay. That's fair. Well, I think this is honestly, like, beyond, like, obviously the poker play. I think this is something you legit should think about a little bit and address, like any kind of way you can get out of those habits of the past, whatever it is, whether it's meditating, whether it's just going on a walk, taking some deep breaths. I mean, studying is going to go a very, very long way. That's the number one thing you should do. But also, like, that mental side is important, like getting over, like, certain habits. Like I can give an example of myself. Like, me and Kurt have been studying in the last, like, 6 to 8 months a lot together. And before that, I had a few weird habits that was just kind of like, got into a habit of doing, maybe wasn't studying enough, got into a habit of doing, and then learned, hey, this spot isn't as good, and you get out of those habits. And I think, like, just sitting there and focusing on everything new you've learned and just, like, meditating or doing something that, like, hey, whatever the last 10 years have been, whatever, dude, that means you've been playing since you were like 13, number one. So who cares about all the years you were playing between 13 and 18 anyway? Like, you're very young. This is a new beginning in terms of your poker beginning. Try to forget those old habits. Don't get tilted. Whatever it takes, just take those little steps. Whether it's like Kenny likes to meditate during breaks. I know that's a big thing Kenny does. He'll take a 5-minute meditation during breaks, and just to clear his mind and clear any negative thoughts. Because, of course, poker does have those moments where you're going to have shitty things happen. You're going to have annoying things where your pocket jacks lose to pocket 8s at a table, and you're going to lose flips over and over and over. And to be able to get over those things and just play your best is, I feel like, so underrated. Like, I used to say this a lot, like, a mediocre player at his A game will beat a good player at his C game a lot of days. So it's just something like, the more you could bring your A game, the more you could bring your best mental game, your best A game to the table, you're going to have a lot more success. I think that's just something you got to start thinking about more, and taking in these studies, and not only taking those in, and just not thinking about the past. Like, stop thinking about the past, and then this is a new poker life for you. This is a new journey you're on now, and that was the journey too that you went through, and you learned a lot, and now you're going to learn a lot more. And, like, fuck all that, like, you know what I mean? Just best play every time. I hope that wasn't too much of a ranting speech, kind of a therapy moment in a sense, but, like, Just want to say that.
No, I definitely agree. And even like since we had this first session Tuesday, like I've really been just paying attention to that and the other videos on the YouTube and just trying to like kind of just get myself away from how I used to play as if it wasn't like 2 days ago. But every tournament I've played like 6 tournaments since then, and I've cashed every single one because I've just been, not that I'm a great player, obviously, as we can all see, but I'm just trying to take those things into account and really just like actually think about every play as I'm making it rather than just fucking shoving my 2 pair when somebody probably has a straight.
Yeah, when you're playing, you should never get these thoughts about like, I've been on a downswing for 10 years. Like, get those thoughts, whenever that thought happens to you, picture going away in a cloud, take a deep breath, whatever it is, picture it exiting your mind, because you shouldn't even have those thoughts. Like, those are poisonous thoughts to have while you're playing. All you have to focus on, like Kurt says a lot, be in the moment. Just be in that moment as much as you physically can be. No other thoughts matter. Like, literally, that's how you're going to win. If you're just as in that moment as much as humanly possible. Like, even for me, you see when I'm streaming sometimes and I start thinking about this, thinking about that, thinking about this, it distracts me from the moment and I might make a mistake or two. It's the same thing with your thoughts. Like, if you're having all this stream of consciousness of thoughts where it's like distracting you here, you're thinking about this, you're thinking about that, you're not going to play your A game, right? So that's just all kind of trying to get you to think, like.
Yeah. I was going to say, and just I want to throw this in for extra perspective on the, I guess, non-pro side of things too. Like last night when I was playing, I was also in Steve's stream, and I was very deep in, in a tournament that was like on the high end of my bankroll, and I was kind of focused. Like I even wrote in the stream, I was like, oh, there's 125 paid. I'm like in 75th right now, and Steve was just like, what are you talking about? Don't even think about that. Don't even look at that. That's not important. You need to be playing your game and doing that.
Yeah.
And
yeah, you were saying you're like,
what got me out of it, and and then I went back to doing what got me to where I was, and it was, and then I blasted off, and I think more than doubled my chips in about 10 minutes. That mental refocus was so valuable.
I think the comment you might have specifically made was like, oh, I'm going to cash it. I'm so close to cashing. I really hope I cash or something. And like, that's cool to think. Of course, we all hope we cash, but I think the more that your mind's like verbalizing that, the more it'll make you be like, well, I'm gonna not take this spot because I got to make sure I cash, or I might not do this moment because I want to make sure I cash. So I think it's really important to like, yes, of course, you're going to get that thought of like, oh my God, 26K would be so cool. I could do this, I could do that. Or cashing would be so cool. I could do this, I could do that. But really, the more you can take yourself away from those and just be in the moment, best play, and make adjustments to maybe how people are thinking about those moments. You can make adjustments to other people and understand other people are going to get those thoughts. But for you, you're just going to sit there and be in the moment as much as possible. You're going to think about what other people are thinking, but you're not going to let the pressure of the money, the pressure of this, the pressure of that, the pressure of the glory even. Like I tell slammers sometimes, like, there's glory in winning too, and that's fucking awesome. It's a great feeling, but like, you just want to only focus on the moment. And then when you're done, you can celebrate all the glory, have fun, enjoy it, you know what I mean? But I think it's just so important to be in the moment when you play. It's a very underrated aspect that I think even like, I see like players who are really good players, like not do enough and like not bring their A game enough to the table. All right, went off there. Let's go, Kurt. We can resume here.
That's fine. Cool if you got called with kings, though. Got called by worse hand.
I called aces,
Yeah, I also think, I guess just one more thing to add on to that is that being a part of a community and like we're all growing here together, and obviously this isn't going to be the first one of our members' hand histories that we end up sharing, but yeah, I mean, just do it to, not only challenge yourself to grow within the community, but also like, show us how you're improving, show us that these sessions are really helping. Now, like, again, I'm not dogging on your play right now. I know we're all really early on to this, and a lot of you guys are either semi-professional or you play for fun, you just want to improve. So, but yeah, just don't worry about what happened in the past. Just worry about what's going on right now, and just focus on working hard, showing up to these sessions, and we're going to help you guys as much as we can to, improve your game. Don't worry about how much you used to lose in the past. That's in the past for a reason. We're here to win now. And not even winning so much. Let's just make the best possible decisions we can make. 2 sevens. Should be playing this. Yeah, I think this hand is going to be pure call here. I don't think we get any 3-bet in this spot.
You don't like the call?
Yeah. Go ahead. I guess we can figure out what we want to do in the spot. What are you guys doing when it checks to us with pocket sevens? I'm not asking what you think of this bet. I'm asking what you would do with 2 sevens here. So it's a check. Kind of lets us check. Max is 4 ways. I was checking. Slammers is check. That's move says mostly check. Sometimes we'll bet 1 BB. Yeah, so I actually think, or go ahead, Steve. I guess you can throw in your 2 cents.
I'm thinking either you could go a very small bet here might be the play, like a bet of like 2.2 big blinds or 2 point something like that, or I could see check being definitely an option here too. I kind of would lean either a very small bet or check.
Yeah, so I think, I mean, everybody touched on it. I think we mainly want to check here. I wouldn't hate like a small bet here at a very low frequency. For one, I don't think big bets are really used on a board like this because if we have an ace in this spot, we likely have the best hand. More like if we do have the best hand, we absolutely have the best hand that needs very little protection. Like there's no really straight draws on this board. There's no flush draws. Like, you know, EP and hijack are not going to have much 3 or 4x here, so we don't really need to worry about a 4-card straight coming out. That's mostly the big blind we have to worry about. But yeah, for the most part, I think even if we do bet here, a smaller size would be good, like 25% or lower, I think would be fine. So I don't hate the bet with the sevens, but I think it's just putting in way too much money. And I also think if this hand gets called, it's almost never getting called by a worse hand. I think that's why betting small is also good because it does leave some potential for like pocket sixes, a 5-4 suited, stuff like that to potentially come in. And then again, yeah, this board just does not need like a lot of protection. So more often than not, I just don't think the big bet really exists here. So yeah, it's also, like I said, it's kind of hard to, like, we can't run these through a solver because there's no 4-way solver yet. So we just kind of have to freestyle and think about what works best here. So yeah, I guess for the most part, I wouldn't hate a very small bet, but I think a bet this big doesn't really accomplish very much because I think when we're called, we just end up getting called by hands that are better than us. But I also don't mind a small bet sometimes because if we can fold out hands like, for example, like king queen offsuit or jack 10 of diamonds, hands that like have decent equity on turns and rivers versus us, I think that's a pretty big win. So if we can bet like a very small size and where we're risking very little to potentially fold out hands like that, I think that's a decent win for us as well. So I do think we get some bet here, but we mostly want to be checking. Yeah, and in general, the more people that are in our hand, the tighter you have to be with your value range and your bluffing range because you're going against 3 different ranges here. So that's another reason why it's better to be playing pots heads up because you can be a little bit, crazier. You can go for more thin value. You can go for more bluffs. But when you're up against 2 or 3 different ranges, it's harder to get these bets through a lot. So in general, when you're multi-way, you need to be much tighter with your value range and your bluffing range. Ooh, sexy hand. We'll go like another 15 minutes, I think, guys.
Yeah, something like that, maybe like 10. Okay, we're going to hop on that Twitter space after this. Another little poker Twitter space.
And what do you guys want to do here? So we got a middle position open. We've got a flat on the button with only 8 bigs. And we're in the big blind with king jack suited.
So we got Swift Road says call. Max says peeling. So I'm closing the action, so I'll flat. Rhodesian says flat. See what I'm doing flood. Close call. Squeeze could just rip it, but I think 3x is strong. That's the move says call. I think we're all kind of in agreement it's a call here, it's looking like.
Yeah. Call considering the button's range should be strong. I think the button's probably just kind of doing whatever. I don't think people are like in the mindset where they're trapping here. He also only has 8 bigs, so when somebody opens for 3, they're most likely getting called by anything, so I think trapping doesn't make a lot of sense. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're not trapping, so they might not notice that either. I would just assume he's probably calling with something he shouldn't be calling with. In general, I would say like this wouldn't be the worst squeeze spot, but when we see a 3x from early position from a 20 big blind stat, I'm just going to assume that is going to be a relatively tight range in general. So, like, I kind of don't hate jamming here, but with the information thinking our middle position open is probably a bit on the tighter side, and his hand plays pretty well multi-way, and it's likely that we get called by worse hands in this. Like, I don't see this guy like raise calling king 10, queen jack, and stuff like that. It's probably just best as a call. Ooh. So, yeah, I don't think we need to harp on this too much again. This range in general is going to be a lot better for the early position openers range. Like we never have ace queen, we never have queens, we never have aces. Maybe not even a hand like pocket sevens that would make a decent like squeeze jam in this spot. So we're really lacking a lot of the strong hands here. So this is basically like we're playing our hand, we're not playing our range. So I'm assuming that's why we're seeing a bet here. So again, in general, when you're thinking about donk leading, the board needs to be better for your range than it is for your opponents, and we have the exact opposite happening here. Now, what I think would actually be a pretty sweet play is if we check and this player bets, we get to do either some check call or a check raise here. And when we just donk lead in this spot, like we're never able to check raise bluff with hands like this because we're just betting like this. So yeah, in general, I won't harp on this too much. We kind of covered that in the last hand. Our opponent has a clear range advantage over us on this board. So we're going to be checking 100% of our range here mostly. Now, as played, we're obviously going to bet to call off because our hand definitely has enough equity.
This is kind of why on the last session we had, Kurt, I was talking about, like, there's good spots to donk lead, but, like, we don't want to think about the donk leading ranges way too much because I want overall people get in the habit of, like, not, like, there's been a lot of leads in the session we've watched here, and we want people to overall not get too much in the habit of just leading every spot when they hit a hand. You know what I mean? If you're donk leading a hand, like we've talked about, it should be about the board, like the range you have in the board, rather than just like the hand in your specific holding. You know what I mean? And like that's why we're not getting into too many donk leading ranges anyway, because a lot of them are pretty complicated. And like most spots, like if you're just playing a checking first strategy, it's gonna be fine. Like there are gonna be some moments, like Kurt said a lot, donk leading is good. But if you play a check first strategy in a lot of those spots out the big blind, you're gonna be relatively okay, even if you're not donk leading in a lot of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, donk leading does get very complicated. So again, that doesn't necessarily mean that it shouldn't be used. It absolutely should. But for the most part, people are not incorporating it properly. And even when they are, ranges still get complicated on flops, turns, and rivers. So I think that's really one of the more advanced topics we're going to have to deal with. So if we can just kind of cut that out of our game while we are trying to improve on our fundamentals, then I think that would probably be best. 9-8, definitely a little too wide to be overcalling here. If we're suited, I think it's fine. Yeah, I think this hand's definitely a little on the wide side, though. I think probably the widest offsuit limp we want to have here is like maybe a Jack-10 offsuit.
I was going to say, Kurt, what would you be limping here? Let's talk about that for a second, because, a lot of people like to overlimp maybe a little bit too much. And what would you be limping here if you could pick a limping range? Like, you'd probably be raising most of your hands you're coming in with, I would guess. But, like, what limps might you choose in this spot?
Like small pocket pairs, maybe a hand like ace nine that doesn't necessarily like play super well, but if it like flops an ace, it needs very little protection, and also that's kind of a hand that doesn't play well multi-way. So if I limp a hand like ace nine off on the button, and the small blind and big blind end up coming into the hand as well, I have a hand that doesn't play well post flop. So I'd much rather limp a hand like let's say even ace six suited, basically, because that hand plays a little bit better multi-way because it can flop flush draws, stuff like that. So I would, I mean, we kind of go on and on about what hands I want to limp and what hands I want to ISO. Basically, you want to choose the hands to ISO that are either obviously strong enough to ISO with, or that they don't necessarily play well multi-way. So you want to do your best to try to get the pot heads up. And then I want to be limping a little bit more with hands like pocket threes that don't play very well multi-way, but can flop really big and win big pots. And hands that play like pretty well as well, like a hand like 9-8 suited, like I was talking about. That hand plays pretty well multi-way. So hands that flop well are good candidates to be limping here. And one more point is, I think I've harped on this before, but if I usually see somebody limping, I'm going to assume that player is weaker. So if I'm in position with them, I'm going to do my best to isolate, so I have the chance of not only playing a pot heads up, but playing a pot in position against a weaker player. Most donk leads are on the small side pretty much, Swift Road. I have seen that some bigger ones do get used, but I normally only incorporate like a third pot donk leading size. Again, I'm still doing a lot of studying myself with Odin and donk leads, so I guess to be continued with a lot of my analysis there. So yeah, on this river, I think flop and turn is fine. I think we can call twice. I think we can even have like some raise on the flop, but mainly call. I think the call on the turn is mandatory as well. Now we get this basically 20% pot bet here on the river. What are you guys doing? Yeah, good point there, Fountain and Flood. I think if we are going to raise, I think a bigger size would be good. I think we're giving our opponent like way too good of a price here, where I don't really expect him to ever fold with a pair. Yeah, it's a difficult spot, Swift Road, so don't get too discouraged with it. So Slammer, we called on the flop and the turn versus two different bets with our straight draw, and now we're facing a 20% pot bet on the river, and we're wondering if we should fold or raise. Obviously calling's not in the question. Yeah, it's a difficult spot, Swift Road.
Yeah, river raises are never going to be like a super, usually not going to be a super simple moment, it's probably going to be a pretty, it's always a little bit of a tough decision to go for it on the river in these spots, and hopefully, you evaluate enough moments, you'll get better at them.
Mm-hmm. All right, wait for a few more comments. I'll let you give your 2 cents, Steve, and I'll chime in here. If I raise, it would be more around the 9 big blind range, I think. Yep, bigger is fine. I would even go bigger than that, honestly, if I was going to be raising here. I think we definitely want to go polar here because we're essentially repping a straight or a 10. So when we're trying to rep like really strong, again, we want to use polarized ranges, which are always on the bigger side. So yeah, we could raise here pretty big. We can make it anywhere from like 11 to 15 bigs on the river, I think.
That's
even bigger if we want to maximize our fold equity, honestly.
Rhodesian says if you raise, you would be about 9 big blinds. That's says probably make it 15 big blinds. Agora says I definitely should have bet much larger if I was going to continue. Slammer says raise to 11. Are all you guys raising, I guess, or are you guys...
If they're raising, I think is the question.
Biased by what we're saying a little bit, or is everyone actually raising? I'm just kind of curious. I feel like we've given a little biased here, but... okay, that's the move. Okay, so that's if I'm raising. Okay,
right.
Okay, they say fold, but if I was raising. Okay. They're okay. Rotation's folding, slammer's folding. That's the move probably folding. It's tough a little bit in this spot because like Kurt kind of talked, so we wouldn't be in this exact moment, I guess, with this hand. So it makes it a little bit tougher.
Well, let's just assume we have 9-8 suited here, so I think we can go from there. So let's just say we have 9-8 suited, and he raised pre, and we're facing multiple barrels here.
Yeah,
that'll simplify things.
It's a close spot. My instincts telling me to raise here. I don't know if I'm gonna get a fold, but if I was raising, I'd probably go around 12 or something. I'm thinking like 11.5, 12. I mean, almost you could even go a little bit bigger to just make it really polarizing. But I think if I am raising, I'm going to go that size. I probably usually would be raising in this spot. I feel like when he goes this small, but I also do see him sometimes just fucking snapping me with kings, queens, jacks, and aces a lot of the time too. Some hands like that, but I still probably would be opting to raise, although like when he bets this small, it like kind of screams like he has a medium strength value hand, like to me. And probably less bluffs when he's 3-barreling like this but I still feel like you probably have to raise to try to win this pot. But I also do feel like I'm gonna get called a ton. So it's kind of like in between in my head right now, but it's the only way to win this hand. Seems like the play. You're blocking out. I guess you're not blocking really anything out.
Used to have played this hand like a pocket pair under ends to me.
Yeah, like a pocket eight. Well, we got pocket eights, pocket nines blocked out. He probably he could have like a 7 at. I don't know. It's very weirdly played.
Yeah, or like an ace-7, something like that. King 7, ace-7.
Yeah, it's a little hard to range him on.
I'm probably like if I do get to this spot, I'm probably bluffing river to like back-to-back seemingly block bets. But you'd mentioned going even bigger than like 11 before. Like I think at a certain point there's like diminishing returns on making it too big. Like you're gonna get the same result with like 11 versus like 14 here, in my opinion. Like it's probably the same thing. But yeah, I'm definitely raising bigger than this, I think, if I am here.
I kind of think you're getting a little more folds going 14 than 11, but like I don't know if it's gonna make too huge of a difference. So I do agree with you. Like it's probably it's a minimal difference.
I could very easily be wrong there. That's just my instinct there.
Well, just math-wise, the bigger they go, the more you have to fold. So, yeah, just in terms of basic math, you always should be getting more folds versus bigger sizes. So, were you done there, Steve? I'll pick up if you are.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so it's going to be kind of hard for us to stretch for bluffs here because mainly what we're calling with that doesn't have anything on the river is going to be like Jack 8, Jack 9, 9, 8, and flush draws, basically. So that's going to have to be the region that we're going to have to find our bluffs from because we really don't have any bluffs outside of that. So it's not like this is just going to be a full weight bluff. Like obviously folding is going to be fine here too. But this is definitely going to be a spot where like Ode would basically tell us to mix because if we're just like folding here every time, it's too weak. But if we're raising every time, it's too strong or it's too aggressive. So, but that being said, I think the candidate to raise is fine. I think you definitely have to raise with this hand sometimes. And the size is too small. We've already covered that. I think it definitely needs to be anywhere from like the 12 to even like 17 big blind range because that's essentially what we would want to do with the straight, right? We want to get max value with our strongest hands, and we have to raise pretty big. And then at the same time, we want to raise bigger to make it harder for him to call with his more marginal hands. So when we're bluffing. So in general, this is just going to be a spot where we use polarized sizes, and we want to go pretty big here. I think even if he has a hand like ace-4 and he does this, he's just going to snap here because he's getting the right price. Even if he's wrong, like he only has to be right, you know, like 1 out of 5, 1 out of 6 times. I'm not going to try to do math real quick here, but he doesn't have to be right very often in order to call here and be wrong. So, but now we're going to kind of go off how I would play against these type of opponents. So I've lost a lot of money in my career trying to make weaker or mediocre players fold marginal hands pretty much because in general it's like they call like weaker players, they don't bluff enough and they call too much, which doesn't make any sense because why would you call too much when nobody's bluffing? It makes no sense. This is why these people are losing players, but that's just how it is basically. So it's taken me a long time to kind of catch up with that. I literally did the same thing on my stream yesterday where I was like, okay, this guy has shit, he's repping really weak here, I know this hand bluffs sometimes, but it's $22 tournament. Do I want to be bluffing here? Like, I just feel like they bet call here so much. So bottom line is, I ended up raising. He had a hand, whatever. But I think the main thing that we want to take from here is that when we're playing against weaker players, we don't need to be taking these fancy bluff spots because they're just not going to work as often as they should because weaker players are just unable to fold here. And even though he looks really weak, which I think he is, he's going to have like an ace-4 here, maybe an h3 of hearts, a 7-6 that he's just like trying to get thin value from. Like, yes, I agree that he doesn't have the top of his range here, but I also think that they're not going to be good enough to fold these types of hands, and they also don't believe anybody, even when nobody really bluffs this spot very often. So I think the biggest thing you guys can really take from playing against weaker players is just to kind of take like an ABC approach and don't get too fancy in spots like this, especially when you're playing against opponents who are really unable to fold at all. So like I said, I've lost a lot of money in my career trying to make marginal players fold marginal hands, and I'm just kind of making things a little bit more simple by just like, okay, whatever, he's triple barreling, I know he kind of has ass, but I'm just going to fold here because I don't think he's ever going to fold a 4 or a 7. He's just not going to believe me because they don't fold to anything, and I'm just going to wait for a better spot, because if they are always going to call you, then I'm just going to wait till I hit a decent hand and just know they're not going to be capable of folding. So in theory, I think this hand is fine to bluff. We want to be going bigger. But overall, I'm just not really looking to take these spots against weaker players because I don't believe that they're good enough or capable of being able to make folds when they're like triple barreling here.
This is like actually a really great point, because like a bluff is only so good if like the player's capable of folding. Like this guy's just gonna, if you go 14, he's just gonna beat you in the pot with pocket jacks or whatever it is, like, or pocket or ace-7 or something. Then yeah, like the bluff you made makes sense. Right? Like it kind of reminds you of, actually really reminds you of this bluff I made. I was semi-deep in the 388 on Poker Bros a couple of days ago, and I ended up check raise shoving a river in a really interesting spot that like made so much sense for me to have like everything. And the guy just had pocket king. The board was like, let me try to remember, like queen, jack, 8, and then I think another jack on the river with 3 spades. And he had pocket kings, no spade, and just bet call the river to my check raise shove. And like, yeah, like I'm repping like way better than what he has. I mean, I have like everything, and he doesn't have any of, like, you know, but like he snaps me because there's just not a thought. Like they're not folding. Even though my bluff line does seem like a pretty good bluff line. Like I blocked out like the straights. I think I had like 9-8 or something. I don't remember my exact hand comp. I think I might have had like 9-8 with the 9 of spades. I blocked out a lot of the straights, the flushes. Really didn't think he had a flush by the line he took. And doesn't matter though. The guy isn't folding, and like that's what bad players tend to do. They don't fold those close spots ever. So a bluff is only so good in those moments if you think the guy's actually gonna fold it, right? Like if there's a moment where the guy is just gonna bet his value and never fold, then it's a little, you know, it's a lot less good, you know. So I think actually the point Kurt made is really, 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 really on point, and something I almost struggle with sometimes too, because like a spot could be a good bluff moment, but if the player has no capability of folding, then it's not at all, you know? So it's kind of an interesting thing to talk about. I do think it's a very interesting subject.
I think the worst players on average you're playing with, the more you should be playing ABC and letting them walk into the mistakes, frankly.
100%.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Yeah, and
Sure.
just use a KISS method. Keep it simple. Like, we don't need to be making these fancy plays unless we're going up against more capable opponents for the most part. And I guess I'll say, if you guys are working with Odin, one of the biggest differences you'll see between like working with Odin and then playing against weaker players is that you're going to see Odin making bluffs that these random opponents are just not capable of having, because most like weaker players just have value when they bet 3 streets and they can't find the bluffs. It's always easy to find value, but it's hard to find the bluffs. At the same time, Odin's also finding folds versus bets that these weaker players aren't capable of folding pretty much. So if you are studying with Odin, definitely keep these in mind, that when you do see these outputs, maybe like fold a little bit more versus triple barrels, because your opponents are just going to have more value than bluffs than Odin will. And also, maybe you don't have to bluff as aggressively against these random opponents as you would against Odin, because Odin's going to be capable of folding some like marginal hands in spots, because they basically know what hands are good to call with and what hands they need to end up folding versus a raise, where these weaker players are just incapable of folding any kind of value. So basically, to sum it up against these guys, we want to keep it simple, and I guess more often than not, you can exploitively be triple barreling more with value than with bluffs. Because again, if your opponents are not folding enough, then you bluffing as much as you would against somebody who's folding appropriately, you're going to be losing more money because they're just calling you more often than not. So how you exploit that is by bluffing less and value betting not only more, but more thinly as well, because they're not folding spots that they should be. So just keep it simple, kind of avoid these spots. Again, this spot in theory I think is fine. The bet size on the river needs to be a little bit bigger, but yeah, I just wouldn't try to get too fancy in this spot. So I'm assuming we're going to see a call here almost always.
And I do feel like a lot of the games, a lot of us play are people like call too much. Like something I've noticed lately is people are very cally, very loose cally. So I think your point rings even more true because people are. I feel like it's such a thing where people just don't fold in a lot of these close spots nowadays, where it makes it a lot better to take those 3 barrels with maybe a little bit thinner value in certain moments. You're trying to maximize your value if you think people are playing that kind of style, you know, something like we talk about sometimes like MDF, minimum defense frequency, where like in certain moments you should be defending this percentage of hands, you know, and it works really well, especially when you're playing against good players. But if you're playing guys you don't think have a bluffing range in a spot, let's say, or have almost no bluffs at all, then you can kind of take MDF out of the window in a lot of those situations because, you know, if you think there's like no chance he has a bluff or some guy's so polarized in a certain moment, you can't just go by like the MDF with what the solvers are telling you. If these players are playing so far outside the solvers and they're playing their hands completely face up all the time, that like, you know, maybe I'm not explaining this perfectly, but it makes it so you don't want to use that solver formula all the time in those situations and just make the proper adjustments. And like one thing Kurt said, I think really hits home is like maybe bluff a little bit less and maybe just go for the value a little bit more. Maybe a few of the spots you're missing some value on, you're like, well, this guy never folds, so I'm going to get that extra value in this moment and in this moment and in this moment. It's going to add up a lot.
Right. All right. Yeah. I guess we can cut it here. It's been about 2 hours here, so I guess we'll ask you guys if you have any questions or if you guys want to say anything real quick.
Just gonna hop on this Twitter space. And I messaged you a few things for it just in Messenger just so you check it out.
For the Twitter space?
Yeah, just a couple of things we're talking about. I just messaged that over to you.
All right.
No.
Who's joining that actually? Because I was gonna fire up a stream, but I guess if you want me there, then I can do that for an hour. I'm guessing it's gonna be.
Yeah, I mean, if you need to get off a little early, that's completely fine too. I think hopefully there'll be some other guys from the team, but
okay, yeah, I'm just gonna double check what this this bounty series is real quick. So if I can hang around the whole time, that's fine. But I'll probably just hang around as long as I can until I can max late reg one of the tournaments. So
sounds good.
Yep.
All right, everyone. If you guys have any other questions, just throw it up. Any thoughts, questions, anything?
Thanks, guys. Definitely appreciate it.
Yeah, all good, Agora.
Thank you, Agora, and once again letting us review this. Hope every session enlightens you and helps give you some more info and just keeps growing your poker game, man. Like, think about all these aspects. You just improve like 3 to 4 things in your poker game, how far it's going to go. Then you improve a few more things in your poker game, how far it's going to go. Like, every little thing adds up so much. It's funny because this is what our Twitter space probably is going to be a lot about, is about the little things in the game and how far they go. But I really do think like just every one of these spots, you just adjust this. You don't limp in those spots. You don't donk lead as much in certain moments. You take your time in certain moments. Like, just those 3 things are going to go a really long way. You start studying the charts, you know, just start doing all that, and man, it's going to be amazing where your game will be in a year. You're going to look back and be like, wow, I can't believe this is how I was a year ago. Now see how my game is, you know?
Yeah, definitely.
Yep.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much. Thank you, Kurt.
Whack-a-Bump was in there. Sorry. Fellow Mainer. What's up, Whack-a-Bump? Glad you got to join here.
Wow, another fellow Mainer.
Yeah. Got him on the stream. Got him. The main event happening right now.
There we go. What's up? Awesome.
Yeah. All right, guys. We'll wrap it up here. I guess we're going to do this Twitter space pretty soon, and then I'll be streaming after that. So hope to see you guys for both of those. And thanks again to Agora. Had a lot of fun doing the session. Hope you guys learned quite a bit, and we will see you hopefully for this Twitter space. Thanks, guys.